It's International Workers' Day this month is being celebrated under the theme Combating Child Labour. According to our Basic Conditions of Employment Act, it's a criminal offence to employ a child younger than 15, except in the performing arts sector, with a permit from the Department of Labour. At the same time, inhumane working conditions, wage cuts, retrenchments and rising unemployment are just some of the issues plaguing South Africa's employment landscape. I'm joined now by Labour Minister Thulas Nxesi to discuss some of the issues. Thank you so much for your time, Minister. We do appreciate it. It's another Workers' Day. It's come and gone, but the issue of unemployment, inequality, other labour issues remain a very big problem. And considering what has happened today with President Cyril Ramaphosa needing to leave that COSATU rally and address workers from Sibanye-Stillwater, would you say that we are addressing the issue of unemployment and other labour issues in this country?
Certainly, Heidi, we are addressing the issue of unemployment in the country. But we must put this in context, that prior to this stage of COVID-19 pandemic, the economy was already sluggish going down, and come the COVID, and then we were battered by that, and we talked about 7% drop in the economy, and more than 2 million workers lost their jobs. Whilst we're still recovering, you remember, there was violence in KZN, which even destroyed more jobs. Now, as we are busy again trying to recover, we're faced with the floods, which have destroyed a lot. So it's very clear that even internationally, the situation has not been helpful, because with the exception of what we would call the commodity prices. So the Statistician General, we know what he has said in relation to the jobs. As much as we have tried to create or add about 262,000 jobs, but it's not enough given the people who are joining the labour market. But the issue is the structural weaknesses in our economy, and the program which the president has presented in the form of economic reconstruction and recovery plan, which talks to a number of areas which must create jobs. It has talked to the issues of public employment programs, the economic stimulus. It has talked to the industrial plans, the localization. We have talked about that, as well as measures to reduce the cost of doing business in terms of administrative costs. We have talked about localization strategy, and we have talked about, in particular, government committed to helping the SMMEs. So all those programs, the logic is simple. The logic is very simple. If you don't have investment, you're not going to have the economy growing. If the economy is not growing, you're not going to have jobs. That's the simple logic.
Yes, it's quite a simple logic, but it becomes very difficult for people to want to start up their businesses and create these jobs that government wants the private sector to create when the environment isn't conducive. We'll get into that issue just now. I just want you to perhaps respond to the fact that unions basically had to go to this rally today to get the attention of the presidents, as they are unsatisfied with what Sibanye-Stillwater has put on the table, and they want the president to intervene, with the president saying he will intervene with this labour issue. As the labour minister, should you not also be getting involved and trying to address this ongoing strike that has been going on, I think, for months now?
First idea, I think I need to emphasize that this day was very successful. In most of the areas, there were rallies where workers sat and reflected on what their gains are, but also talked about challenges, because challenges have not ended for the workers. Challenges are going to continue as long as there's employer-employee relations. There are going to be tensions. There are going to be periods like the bargaining period, where the temperatures go up, and where there will be strikes which are legal. So I believe that the workers today, they were just expressing their anger. But when the president indicated that government is going to get involved, it means the Minister of Minerals and Energy and also the Minister of Employment and Labour must get involved. But remember, you're talking about a bargaining process. In a bargaining process, by law, it's the employer and the employees in those particular structures. Government cannot impose itself. However, government can come if issues are not getting resolved and mediate. We are always ready to use the CCMA to do that. I think we are almost at that particular stage now where we're going to call the CCMA. They bring the most experienced mediators to come in and pull the parties together. But the two parties need to understand that bargaining, it's a win-win situation, which means both sides must be ready to engage, must be ready to compromise, and it can only be resolved on the negotiation table. Nothing can replace the negotiations.
It just seems as though this is an issue that's been going on for some time now, and there was such desperation from the unions to try and get the president's involvement. I want us to move over to something that you touched on in your first answer, and something that the president mentioned in his State of the Nation address, where he says it's not government's responsibility to create jobs, it's the private sector to do so. However, many would say that the environment that South Africa is in and the many challenges we face, load shedding, corruption, crime, there are a number of issues that we face here. It's not necessarily a conducive environment to create these jobs. As the employment minister, how do you feel about the environment that we have here in South Africa to create these jobs that are so needed?
I think government has pronounced. We have accepted that in the past few years, there have been problems in relation to corruption. But what you can see, you can be able to witness that government is hard at work to deal with the issue of the corruption. But unfortunately, it has to follow the processes. We've just received the Part 4 report of the Zondo Commission, and there are issues there. The president was able to say as early as when he received the first one that he would be able to come up with a comprehensive response on how this issue is going to be treated and how you have to deal with the people who are implicated. But also the president has said it. The private sector is ultimately responsible for new investment, which will drive growth and create jobs. But government also employs directly and indirectly the people. But right now, the main role of government is to create, through its policies and laws, that conducive environment we are talking about. First thing we need to talk about, the energy security is the biggest issue which we're dealing. Hence, the issue of Eskom is a very big issue. And you sort out the energy security, we believe that you might have sorted out 50% of the challenges which are facing us. But corruption is going to be a process because it's litigation after litigation, but we will have to deal with those processes. Otherwise, we can't be careless in dealing with those issues. And some of the issues which the president has raised, we've talked about a social compact to say, how do we ensure that small businesses thrive? And you can only do that by removing the administrative burden. But what does that mean? It doesn't mean that we are going to downgrade the rights of the workers. The workers will remain protected. But if you have an employer who has only 5 people compared to an employer who has thousands of employers, they do not have all the resources to be able to deal with some of the issues which are in the legislation, which are administrative burdens. We need to re-look into that and recommit ourselves, all of us, as the different parties, how we're going to streamline those issues so that it becomes easier for the small businesses to implement those and be able to grow. So we are creating the environment. Discussions are continuing, and they're at an advanced stage on some of them. But some of them, there's going to be tension, there's going to be differences, but we must find ways on how to resolve those differences.
Minister, I'm running out of time and I have a few pointers that I still want to get through. If I could maybe just get your response to the fact that the township bill was signed in Gauteng this week, and while that is some good news, especially for those here in the province, what about documented foreign nationals? Do you not think that they also deserve such a bill and to benefit from such a bill as they are legally in the country?
Documented foreign nationals are legal and they have the right to work. They have all the rights in terms of the international conventions which we have signed as this particular country under the ILO, under the UN. as economic or even political refugees, but the issue is about the illegal immigrants who, unfortunately, as much as they have the rights, but they're not supposed to be here. That is an issue which I think Minister Mtsoaledi is dealing with. That is an issue which our inspectors are also dealing with. But what we have to say, in terms of the proposal of our national labour migration policy, we've looked into the different sectors where we've seen how the employers are exploiting these people because they are desperate, employing them, not giving them the minimum conditions they're supposed to give, just to exploit the cheap labor. What we have said, we're going to deal heavily with those employers. However, as much as we would want to regulate this particular issue of the migrant laborers, international migration is an international phenomenon. But what we are saying, we can't ban them in terms of our constitution. All we can do is to regulate, and in terms of the policy which we have published, we're talking about imposing the quotas in certain sectors that at least a particular percentage must be the people who are South African, not the foreign nationals. So this is how we're trying to regulate this particular matter.
Minister, are you worried about a brain drain and how highly skilled people are leaving our country?
We've always been worried about the brain drain. If you go to your history, it's not starting now. It has long been there in the 50s, in the 60s, in the 70s. Highly trained people in the developing countries being attracted by the developed economies. So we've long been worried about that. And sometimes, because they are highly developed countries, it's not easy to compete with them. But we have to do something in relation to that. So a brain drain will always be our worry, because these are the critical resources which we need in the country. We must do everything. Look at the different strategies which you can be able to employ. But equally, this issue of immigration, we must know that there are certain critical skills which we do not have in this country. We are relying also on other countries. So,
but Minister, sorry to interject. Do you think enough is being done to keep the highly skilled people in this country? It goes back to the issue of a conducive environment and whether or not we are cognizant of the fact that as much as it might be people that opt to leave the country, they are needed because they are highly skilled, and there might be scarce skills that they are choosing rather to give to another country's workforce.
The issue of the movement of the people, that's free movement of the people when they want to move into other countries. But I think this country has tried to attract those particular skills, and we even had special dispensation at the level of the public service, where we added special benefits for the people who are regarded as the special skills. But because we are faced with high unemployment, that's a reality in the country. A lot of people or some of the people have left out of their preference, but we still need them. There are special measures which we have done. And I think there have been special appeals to try and say, how do we attract those people back into the country? Some do come back, some do not come back. They find greener pastures outside the country.
Minister, I want to ask you something. Does the unemployment rates keep you up at night? Does it worry you?
It's the biggest problem facing South Africa. Certainly, any leader in South Africa, the issue of unemployment, which is at around 35% and going to above 60% for the young people, it's the biggest challenge which is facing this particular country. All of us have to be worried.
It's just crucial for those in power, such as yourself as the Employment Minister, to provide the necessary solutions, because I think South Africans are really tired of talk. I want us to move over to the National Labour Migration Policy. We do know that that was out for public comment. Where are we in terms of that policy, and when is that going to move forward once finalised?
We gave that document and they gave it 90 days for public comment. I think we are now less than 60 days and the comments are trickling in. We have agreed that we're going to have an outreach where we move into all the regions, speaking to the employers and the employees, explaining the rationale for this particular labour migration policy, but also and hearing their views on what they are suggesting, and also giving us their so that they can be able to give us their informed positions once we have explained it. And then once it's there, we're going to take it, collate everything, and then make submissions and make revisions and take it back to cabinet, which then can go to parliament, because it must go with the necessary amendments in the law if we all agree.
Minister, just one last question. We're going to have two young people on the show just after this interview and get their perspective on our unemployment rate, given the fact that we have over 60% of the young people in this country unemployed. Those who are sitting at home watching this and looking at how Workers' Day is celebrated every single year, yet they sit at home and don't have jobs. Those who look up to this government and the leadership of this country, what would you say would be the solution to tackle unemployment, specifically the youth unemployment, as we know that people say the youth are the future of any country, yet the majority of them are unemployed? What is your solution as a Minister of Labour and Employment?
I must indicate that what we're doing as government in relation to the economic reconstruction and recovery plan, we're trying to address exactly those issues of employment. The public employment programs where we've created through the president more than 800,000 jobs, they're trying to address even those issues. But we are saying it's not going to be an event. It is going to be also a process to be able to create those jobs. And then let's allow for conversation, let's allow for the young people to make suggestions. The fact that we're starting to talk about small businesses, and when we're saying we need to cut the red tape, we are trying to create jobs. The fact that in the public service we have said now, at the entry level, the issue of the experience must not be a requirement. We are trying by all means to try and accommodate the young people. But massive increase on what we call public employment programs is going to help. And yeah, that's a package of measures which we have put in place in order to ensure that the economy grows and we create those jobs. We know it's very frustrating for the young people, but the different departments, the different programs which were running with the private sector, the pathway management programs were running, and the youth people, I mean the young people and the whole youth in the country, they just need to get in touch with us as the different organizations. We come and tell them what we are doing so that they can have access to the information, because one of the biggest things is the issue of access to the information for some of our young people.
You know, Minister, with all due respect, I think the young people of this country are very desperate for job opportunities, and they find themselves in very difficult positions. We're constantly hearing of these programs, but that doesn't necessarily create sustainable jobs. And I think that is the big concern, that we need to create sustainable jobs and give young people in this country an opportunity to be part of the workforce and contribute economically to this country. But we thank you for your time and for speaking to us here on eNCA. That was Labour Minister Thulas Nxesi.